I'm Sonali Patnaik. I'm an anthropologist and I've been working with an organization called Arupa Mission Research Foundation. We work with the government as well as the civil society, and we have had the opportunity of working with a large number of donors as well as corporates on both CSR and prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. India is not new to CSR as such. I mean, if we talk about philanthropy, it's there in the Indian blood. We do talk about doing things for others. Anything in excess is generally supposed to be shared. So they clearly set out, rules and regulations, and they have a Schedule 7 also included in it, which talks of areas where you can, as a company, put in your money for people and how you should be reporting, and also how much of the money you should be spending. They're not talking about spending all the profit, but 2% of the previous 3 years. And in fact, when they started working out on the categories of companies that would come in, it was large, medium and small enterprises, and they developed a category saying that the companies with an annual turnover of say 1000 crores or more, or a company with a net worth of 500 crores or more, or small enterprises with say 5 crores profit in the past 2-3 years would qualify for it. So given this kind of a criteria based on the structure, size and the profit that the companies are making, one could clearly see that a large number of companies would come under it. And if you look at the GDP of the country as such, which is touching $1 trillion now, and India is going to be the 10th largest economy in the world, then in 2013 when the act came up, they were expecting about 8,000 companies to fall into this CSR process, and it was expected that 3 to 4 billion rupees money in terms of INR would be actually part of that GDP and would add on to achieving the sustainable development goals for the country. So that's how this whole thing started off and has been continuing, and it's taking shape. It's a very live act, I would say, because every few months we do have new notifications given the new changing scenario in the economic and social sector. So things are shaping up quite a bit. In India now, I think there is a transformation. Since the transformation has been from philanthropy to outcomes, there is a little bit of convergence that has happened between the government and corporates. And this convergence, I think the Act is responsible for it, because the Act clearly says that you should be working on health and nutrition as one of your initiatives. So that till that extent, it is there is convergence, but then it depends entirely on what the policy of the corporate is. One cannot force a corporate to take up a certain agenda, but one can bring them to a platform and try to convince them that okay, this is an issue of importance and we would like you to be part of it and to help us resolve it. So, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has the mandate to take the CSR initiative forward. It has established an institution called the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, where they have a whole set of professionals working on just CSR. They are training people from companies on the legal aspects of CSR, as well as how their money should be spent, as well as training people from the civil society on how they should be working on CSR and how they should be reporting to the government and dealing with the corporate, and about what areas they can work on. So it's like an area of convergence. They play the role of a converging unit for the government, for the civil society, and for corporates, and give a lot of advisory inputs also into it. But they do not have any proper monitoring mechanism as such, because we do not have reports coming from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs saying that, okay, out of the 8,000 that we had listed, this is the status of, CSR spending. It is other private organizations like, say, CRISIL or KPMG or ENY who come up with, or Deloitte who come up with reports, or even the NGO box which regularly comes up with reports, and they all take samples, and these samples vary. Every 6 months you would have a new report, and these samples would vary, the companies would vary, so they would be varying data on, CSR spending and how effective it is. So that's one area which needs to be worked upon, how it's going to be monitored. So the perception of CSR, I would say, varies from company to company, and then we can break up that into, two categories. One is, of course, the public sector units that are there, and the private sector. But again, in the private sector, you have those that are run by a board, and then those which are owner driven. So there is a lot of difference between an owner driven company and a company that is run by professionals from different areas of work and are part of the board. For example, an owner driven company looks at it as a family business, and they still work in that philanthropy mode. So they think that whatever we do is an act of charity, is an act of kindness, and it can be done randomly anywhere and as per their will. So it could be something like an annual function for a school, or giving money to buy shoes and clothes or something like that, but it doesn't add up to anything relating to indicators of the sustainable development goals, or to any, outcomes, meaningful outcomes rather. So, and these are very short term, maybe 2 days, 3 days or whatever. But then there are companies who take CSR very, very seriously also, and I think it is taking CSR seriously becomes important for them. One, because of their leadership, it is very important to have a leader who actually feels that yes, business should be responsible and you should be, giving back to the community. And otherwise, because they're forced to do CSR, because the act says you have to do it, and therefore they have some professionals engaged in the sector, and these professionals take it forward. Now, when it comes to professionals again working in the sector, there are two types. One who would be maybe who would be given an additional charge of, taking CSR forward, and he or she may not have the experience of actually implementing a CSR project. So that's where it makes a lot of difference. But then if you have hired someone who is already a professional with a lot of experience in doing social development work and has worked on baselines and indicators and such things, then yes, of course, it takes a very good shape. So, and there are companies who believe in it, and when they start believing in it, it becomes part of their culture and they absorb it, and every employee is engaged in it in some way or the other. So they feel that it's just a part of, their everyday thing. So there are a lot of examples of such companies also. So it is in some way or the other connected with what they're doing. Now, if it is a global company also, they would have a global CSR policy. Their global company would have a CSR policy. So the company registered in India would have to match its CSR policy with the land law of the land as well as the global policy. Then, of course, the Prime Minister's pet program on WASH, Swachh Bharat. So, so that's also taken an interest, and they would rather donate money to the Prime Minister's fund for WASH, and say that we are part of this campaign. So there was a report published by the NGO Box in April 2017, and I think that's the latest report that we have. So, based on that, one could say that Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka are the first top states as far as CSR is concerned, and a lot of money has gone into these states. And the others would be like West Bengal and Rajasthan. So that's where the states are. But then again, um, if we take a look at the way the states function, why some states are lagging and the others are moving ahead on CSR, it has a lot to do with the leadership in the state actually, and whether the state has an enabling environment for CSR to take place, and what the CSR thought process is in the state. So, nutrition is not considered standalone in CSR, and I don't think it has been given its due importance. Although in Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, the clause that describes on the schedule that describes what activities one can take up, the government has mentioned hunger and malnutrition as one of the important areas of intervention, but nutrition is not very much on anyone's agenda unless the company is into food production or something to do with fortification of food directly or indirectly. It doesn't feature, or unless the policy says that it has to have nutrition in it. It also depends on the global policy of the company, because the company's global policy, if it has something to do with health and nutrition, then yes, they would have it as part of their policy, and then in the country itself, wherever they are registered, they would include that as their agenda. But then it's a very conflicting issue, and there's a lot of politics always around nutrition, and there are very few companies who actually support nutrition directly. So, nutrition needs to be brought onto the table of CSR. At the national level, yes, there is an enabling environment. We have given scope to companies to come forward and spend money on development issues. But at the states, at the level of the states, it's not there. Not across all the states, in fact. So we need policies, standard policies at the state level also, an enabling environment at the state level, and that's where government advising the government becomes very important. And then also there is this issue around monitoring. Now the only thing that the government asks them for is a 1 or 2 pager on how much money have you spent, and then of course there is a compliance on your sustainability report. But then there is no impact assessment, no monitoring of actually whether any difference has been made and all that. So from that perspective, I think having some processes in place would have been good from the government's end, and that would be something that we would also advise for all the states, not just at the national level, but also at the state level. And then also the engagement of with the civil society has to be enabling, because it is finally the civil society that the corporates are going to be working with. They are not directly working with the government, or sometimes they do support the government on certain issues, but then when it comes to implementation, that's where civil society plays a very important role. And right now, the way things are going, on the civil society, there's a trust deficit between the government and the civil society as such. So, in fact, advisory would be around that. I mean, how to remove the trust deficit, because we need to reach out to more and more people. And by building more barriers, it's not going to be possible to reach out. And who is going to monitor the activities of the government? We need social audit also. So it can't be, just the government saying that, okay, this is what has to be done. So there has to be a check and balance. and that's why the three partners need to work together. So a strategy for that, for the working of these three partners together, is very important, and that should be part of the advisory that we would be interested in actually.